Mr. Storyteller, I
Yes.
want you to take us back to that moment when you were what? How old were you in 1956? And, and
About
somehow
19 or 20.
19 or 20.
Yeah.
So we all have seen Jungle Book. We know it was your idea that the snake's eyes would hypnotize you, and you had to sell that idea to Walt. I want you to tell us that story. What was it like for a young person to go up to Mr. Disney and say, "I think I have an idea for this movie"?
Well, what happened on the Jungle Book, it's kind of funny. I had worked on a number of Disney features, and when the Jungle Book moved into production, I had pretty much had it with, I wanted to take a break from feature filmmaking, and I was working on short films because I was kind of enjoying that. I wanted to take a break. And Bill Peet was the story artist who was developing the film. And Bill had done a version of the movie that Walt Disney simply didn't like. You know, he thought it was too dark, he thought it wasn't fun enough, and so Bill Peet and Walt Disney got into this big argument over how the film should be handled, and it ended up with Bill Peet walking off the movie. Bill Peet had been with Disney since the 1930s, so you can imagine how big this argument must have been if Pete was going to walk off the movie after decades at the Disney studio. So then, the problem then falls in our lap, and in my lap as a young story artist, having never done this job before. You can imagine how I felt. I find myself in the story department, and I had to ask some of the veterans, what do I do? And they said, well, you got to give Walt the stuff that turns him on, that he finds entertaining. And so when I came up with this idea of having the snake hypnotize Mowgli up in the treetops, for some reason, Walt Disney liked that. And he liked it so much that he asked the Sherman Brothers, his in-house songwriters, if they would write a song, because he thought the sequence had such potential. So Sterling Holloway came in, recorded the song, and then Vance and I went back to work on now taking the same sequence and trying to embellish it to work with the song. Now, to answer your question, Joe, I was so terrified of pitching to Walt Disney, I didn't approach him. I just didn't have the nerve to approach him. So I did the storyboards, and they were up there, and Walt came in, but I let my associate, Vance Gary, do the pitch to Walt Disney.
So again, a storyboard is, so you took the idea and you kind of drew what it would be like in a sequence of pictures.
Exactly, a sequence of drawings that spells out the entire sequence, everything that happens in the sequence. Long shots, medium shots, close-ups, all the business, all the funny stuff, all the little shtick that goes on, that's what.
So you put all that in pictures, and then you told Vance, this is what it is, now you go tell him what it is.
Yeah. Well, the way it works, the way it works when Walt Disney comes in for a pitch, he comes in and he doesn't travel with an entourage. Walt comes in by himself. He just walks in, he's got a cigarette, and back in those days everybody smoked. And Walt comes in and he sits down in his chair right up front and says, what do you have to show me? And so basically, you go through the pitch and you show Walt what you had in mind. Now here's the thing about the pitch. Everybody assumes that Walt Disney is seeing this for the first time. It's not true. Walt Disney hung around his studio late at night, looking at everything. He went from people's desk to desk. Everything that we had shown that we show Walt, he had already seen it. He'd either seen it the night before or maybe the week before. So you weren't surprising him. He wasn't surprised by anything because he had already seen it. But you went through this pitch kind of like as a formality because that's what you were supposed to do. And so even though Vance pitched this sequence for the first time, I honestly believe Walt had already seen it. Yeah. So his mind was already made up, whether it was yay or nay. He had seen it, he had made up his mind. If he liked it, then he was happy with it.
Okay.
The 30-year man ever come back?
He never did.
Oh.
Bill Peet never came back. Bill Peet had already established himself as a successful children's book author. He had been writing a series of children's books.
Did they ever mend their friendship?
No,
No.
and Bill was very sad about that. He was very sad because Walt passed away that same year. They had the breakup in the spring of 1966, and by December of 1966, Walt had passed away. So Bill had a lot of regrets that he had never made up with Walt, you know. So that was kind of a sad.
He's not alive either.
Bill passed away a few years ago, about 2 or 3 years ago.